Hi, and welcome to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation focused on youth mental health. Before we begin today's episode, I just wanted to let you all know that all content that is found in our podcast is created for informational purposes only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard in this podcast. Thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving. It's your host Punam here with a very special guest, Gayathri Narayanan. You might have heard her speak for last two episodes, beautifully done, where she mentioned lots of benefits for mindfulness, for not only for parents in general, but if you did not get a chance to listen to those episodes, I highly encourage you to listen to them. Today, we will specifically talk about how mindfulness can benefit teens to enhance their focus, concentration, productivity at school, as well as help them to lead a happy, balanced, and successful life, which I know is a challenge in a digital age. So let me welcome my guest here. Welcome back, Gayatri.
Hello, Punam. Thank you again. Thanks for this opportunity. It's always such a joy for me to share this with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. So before I ask more questions, I know I have asked you to introduce yourself for previous two episodes, but who knows, our listeners might be listening to you for the first time. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what are you doing currently?
My name is Gayathri Narayanan, and I am a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. And I've been teaching mindfulness meditation to parents, teens, middle schoolers in various settings. I teach at a couple of different senior living places. I lead community meditation groups. And of course, specifically for this particular episode, we're going to be talking about mindfulness for teenagers. Various contexts have been sharing mindfulness, and it's been such a wonderful privilege and joy for me to do this work. I started teaching, I think, more regularly and formally around 2015. So that's pretty much my work these days. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gayatri. So what age can a child start learning mindfulness?
I have taught children as young as 4 and 5 years old in the elementary school, in our local elementary school. I used to go to their kindergarten class and teach, kindergartners, first graders, second graders. And of course, you're not talking about, long meditations for kids that age, right? But simple techniques like breathing and learning to feel their bodies, learning to know what they're, in the different emotions that they're feeling and give words to some of those emotions, bringing that awareness, sort of like that self-reflective capacity, which is so unique to us human beings, to cultivate that and to learn how to pause and breathe. So very simple exercises, and I used to do it through games and discussion. And it's remarkable how much these little kids learn and how well they're able to actually practice. So I think mindfulness can be introduced as early as 4 or 5 years old, even. Um, Obviously age appropriately, but it's definitely possible to do even at that young age.
Wow, that's very interesting to know. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And you mentioned you do teach 6 weeks of mindfulness for middle schooler and teens. So what do you
Yes.
teach in these sessions?
In this series, the 6 week series, and the classes are about 1 hour long, which is, I think that's that's plenty for that age group, to sort of keep their attention. And the way I do it is, through a mix of activities, movement, discussion and practice, right? So that it's not sort of just sitting and listening to somebody talk, but it's a very sort of interactive environment in which the teens get to engage with the subject. And so in the 6-week program, of course, I introduce them to mindfulness, what it is, and then sort of lead them through the different aspects of mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of bringing awareness to the body and senses, mindfulness of thoughts and feelings, walking meditation, loving kindness practice, self-compassion practices. And I focus a lot, especially with the teen age group, on self-acceptance and self-compassion, because I find in this particular culture that there is a lot of self-judgment, there's a lot of self-hatred, but there's so much aversion and judgment about their bodies, about whether or not they're popular, whether they're good in school or not, and there's all the social pressure that comes, of course, through social media, but also from their peers, and there's just a lot of self-judgment, and as a result, children really suffer from severe anxiety, depression. So I really focus a lot on the practices of loving kindness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, and try to find ways to change their relationship with themselves and the ways in which they speak to themselves. So the sort of the inner critic, and sort of as bringing awareness to that inner voice and learning to make that inner voice a much more, kinder voice. So those are some of the topics that I address in the 6-week program.
Thank you for sharing those details, Gayatri, and I feel it is so important, especially in today's world, to teach that self-acceptance, self-love. I do see people, even adults, struggling, and I'm sure during teen age it's more important for them to fit in, to feel they are loved, they have more friends, and they are accepted. So it's wonderful to know you're doing such kind of work where you're building up a character of our young generation, and they are going to be loving themselves, and then they spread that love among others. So I wanted to ask you another question. So do you have any app recommendation for our teens, or any books recommendation they can do themselves if they're not able to attend your classes?
Yeah, I think for teenagers, the app that many people recommend, and I haven't really gone through those apps in detail, but there's one that's called Stop, Breathe, and Think. That comes pretty highly recommended for children, for teenagers. Another one by UCLA, I think it's called UCLA Mindful. That's another good app. And then, of course, Insight Timer has apps for teens, has meditations for teens as well, and for adults as well. So those are some of the apps that I know, that I've heard about. So yeah, Stop, Breathe, and Think, UCLA Mindful, Insight Timer. Those are some good ones. And in terms of books, there's this one book that I love to recommend to my teens to read, and it's Into the Magic Shop by Dr. James Doty, who's the director of the CCARE in Stanford, the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research in Stanford. Dr. James Doty. It's an autobiographical account of his own life and how he was introduced to mindfulness in this magic shop. And it's a wonderful story of his life, and the practice of mindfulness has literally saved his life. I mean, very literally saved his life. So that's a really great book, because you can kind of see him through his teenage years and how how he was, and many of the teens would identify with some of his attitudes and the way he was. And it's a very beautiful book. I really like that one. And another one that I came across recently is called The Mindful Teen by Zung X Vo. It's a DZUNG is the author's name. DZUNG X. The last name is Vo, VO. And it's called The Mindful Teen, Powerful Skills to Help You Handle Stress One Moment at a Time. So those are a couple of books that come to mind that might be helpful.
Thank you, Gayatri. So I wanted to ask you another question because I know time is always a challenge. So do you hear that kind of complaints when you are teaching mindfulness to teens? And what is your recommendation to them who are complaining they have very busy schedule and they can't find time for doing mindfulness?
I offer a sort of a suggested practice schedule. Yeah, it's literally like a 5 minute practice where you do a little bit of breathing, so breathing exercises are really helpful for regulation and for calming the stress levels. So I teach them a couple of different breathing exercises. So you do a little bit of that for a couple of minutes. Then you just stay with your breath, just putting one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, and just following your breath and doing that for about 2 or 3 minutes. And then you end with a little bit of loving kindness practice, just wishing yourself well, saying, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, and then offering loving kindness to all beings everywhere. So just like 2 minutes of each of these practices, 2 minutes of breathing, 2 minutes of mindfulness of breath, let's say 2 to 3 minutes, and then another 2 minutes of metta, loving kindness. And that's enough. Literally, like a 5 to 7 minute practice is all I say for teenagers. And over time, what happens is as they do it, and this is what I find really wonderful with my teenagers, is the ones who I've been interacting with for a long period, because I also do one-on-one mentoring sessions with teens. And initially, they're very resistant. They don't want to have anything to do with meditation. They're like, oh, my mother sent me here. I don't really want to be here. And, lots of eye rolling. And, they're like, oh, this is not cool. Who wants to do meditation, right? But once they start and they start to feel the benefits of it, and sometimes it takes just like 1 or 2 weeks before they start to see that, oh my God, this is really helping me. Then all of a sudden they get interested, and then they start to do the practices, and then it becomes very self-sustaining, and it sort of then starts to take a life of its own, and then they start to practice more regularly. But yeah, it does take a little bit of encouragement in the beginning to get them to sit for a few minutes. But I also offer a lot of informal mindfulness practices, right? So where they can pause in the middle of their days, whether in the middle of class or during lunch break, or, to just take a couple of minutes and just sit down and be present for their breathing, or offer a little bit of loving kindness or self-compassion. So I try to make it so that they don't have to make it just a formal practice, that they can also do the informal mindfulness practice throughout their day. So um, yeah, but it is hard to get them on board initially. That's for sure. Yeah.
Like you mentioned, beautiful ideas, formal as well as informal. So I generally like to use some cues to remind me, like when drinking water, maybe, or turning switch on for my light. Like, oh, this is my mindful moment, or while brushing my teeth. Right. So these small cues help me to become mindful. And as you were saying, switching from one class to another class during maybe walking that time, you can do that 3 deep breaths, or, find that present moment for yourself. I fully agree with you. The onboarding might be a little bit challenging if you do not know the benefits of mindfulness. But once you reap the benefits, when you feel you're more focused, you're more calm, you're present, your relationships with your peers are improving, your classroom uh, presence is improving, you would love to continue that. That's what I hear from my kids, who sometimes do tell me the benefits they reap. But it's so amazing to have you here, Gayatri, and listen to the stories, because you are teaching these classes, you are working with so many teens. So thank you so much for talking to us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Punam. It was a real pleasure, real joy to share all these conversations with you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You are listening to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation. As part of our youth series, we will be releasing new episodes every Friday, so make sure to continue to check those out. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and thank you so much for listening.